All right, let's dive into one of those stories just grabs you, From the Hebrew Bible, the story of Samuel and King Saul, we're going to be talking about ambition, obedience, power struggles, and some serious consequences.
Yeah, it's a story that's, well, thousands of years old.
Yeah.
But it really gets to the heart of human nature, the challenges of leadership, all that. We're going to be looking at the book of 1 Samuel.
1 Samuel, okay.
Yeah, to understand how Saul, the first king of Israel, how he rose to power, and why his reign ultimately, well, it crashed and burned.
It did not go well.
No.
So let's start with Hannah.
Okay.
She's dealing with a tough situation, especially back then. She's barren, can't have children.
And, this was more than just personal sadness for Hannah. Back in ancient Israel, children, especially sons, were, vital. It impacted everything, your lineage, your social standing, even your economic security.
Oh, wow. So this is a big deal.
Huge.
So Hannah, she goes directly to God.
Right to the temple.
In the temple. Mm. And she makes this vow. She says, if he gives her a son, she will dedicate him to God's service.
Talk about a promise.
That's a serious promise.
It is. And, this vow, it's crucial. It sets the stage for everything that follows. It hints at Samuel's destiny and the incredible role he's going to play in Israel's history.
So God answers her prayer.
He does.
She has Samuel. True to her word, she takes him to the temple.
To be raised by Eli the priest.
Eli the priest.
Yeah.
But Eli's sons, not exactly following in dear old Gad's footsteps.
Not quite the role models. No, they're corrupt, abusing their position, no respect for God, for the offerings. It's a pretty stark contrast to Samuel's piety. Sets, kind of a dark tone right from the beginning.
Yeah. And Samuel, even as a young boy, starts showing, he's not just any kid.
Yeah.
God speaks to him directly.
Directly.
Reveals this message of judgment against Eli's entire household.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is where Samuel's prophetic authority, it really takes root. Shows that God is working behind the scenes, even when those in power are totally messing up.
Now, as Samuel gets older, the Israelites, they're facing this threat from the Philistines.
Serious threat.
Serious threat. And they do something pretty big. They demand a king.
Just like all the other nations have.
Just like all the other nations.
Right. It shows a nation that is maybe struggling with its identity a little bit. They're kind of rejecting God's direct leadership and opting for what they see as, normal, even though Samuel warns them about what a king will bring.
Oh, he lays it all out, right?
He does. He lays it out, the taxes, the forced labor, their sons being drafted into the army. It's a pretty sobering reality check. But are they listening?
Not so much.
It's that age-old human struggle, isn't it? Wanting what we think we want without thinking about the consequences. The Israelites, they're fixated on the idea of a powerful human king, someone who embodies security, national pride, and they're ignoring the downsides.
So God basically says, all right, fine, give them what they want.
Anoint a king.
And that's where Saul enters the picture.
It's interesting how he enters, too. He's this young guy from the tribe of Benjamin, described as tall and handsome. And at first, he seems humble, almost hesitant to be king.
He's this unlikely candidate. He's out searching for his dad's lost donkeys and bumps into Samuel. Life-changing encounter.
It really emphasizes a theme that you see over and over in 1 Samuel. Divine intervention. It's like God is orchestrating things, even the random stuff, to make his plan happen.
So Samuel anoints Saul.
In secret. Gives him instructions and signs, confirms that this is God's choice.
His whole life's about to change.
Big time. And this is where the whole idea of leadership gets complicated. Saul, he has some early victories against the Philistines, unites the tribes, proves he can fight.
He's the underdog. Everyone's rooting for him. But then there are cracks. Saul starts making choices that go against what God told him to do.
Yeah, one of the big ones is when he offers a sacrifice that he wasn't supposed to. This disobedience is a real turning point. It's not just about following the rules blindly. It's about trust. Could Saul trust God's plan even when it didn't make sense to him?
And then there's the battle with the Amalekites.
God specifically tells him, destroy them completely.
That he doesn't.
No, he spares their king. And he keeps some of the best livestock.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, that disobedience, it seals the deal. It shows a pattern with Saul. You see pride, self-preservation, and a willingness to, twist God's words to get what he wants. It's a harsh reminder that even those in positions of power, they're accountable to something bigger than themselves.
Samuel confronts him.
Oh, yeah. And it's not a nice conversation.
No.
He says, to obey is better than sacrifice. Those words must have stung.
Yeah.
Samuel tells Saul that because of his disobedience, God has rejected him as king. This is a tense scene. You can just feel the weight of Saul's choices, the disappointment in Samuel's voice. It's the unraveling of a reign that had so much promise in the beginning.
And this sets the stage for another key figure, right? David.
David's story is really interesting because it's all tied up with Saul's downfall. It's not a simple handoff of power. It's this mix of ambition, jealousy, and, you guessed it, divine intervention.
More divine intervention.
Yeah.
So God tells Samuel to anoint a new king, and he finds David.
The youngest son of Jesse, out tending sheep.
Out tending sheep.
This is such a contrast to Saul, highlights David's humility, his connection to nature. He's a shepherd, a musician, has no clue about the destiny that's waiting for him.
Completely different from Saul's big entrance.
Night and day.
And remember, Saul's tormented by an evil spirit now.
After being rejected by God.
David gets called to the court to, soothe the king with his music.
You can just feel the turmoil Saul's going through, the spiritual and psychological effects of losing God's favor. He's paranoid, he's unpredictable, just deeply troubled.
And then you've got Goliath, the Philistine giant.
Taunting the Israelites.
Nobody wants to face him.
Who's David?
David, who steps up with incredible courage.
The classic David and Goliath showdown, right?
Okay.
David, armed with the sling and some stones, takes down this giant, symbolizing, faith and humility over brute force.
The crowd goes wild.
Chanting, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s.
Oof. How do you think that made Saul feel?
Not good. Jealousy just takes over. He sees David's popularity as a direct threat, and it pushes him further down this dark path he's on, paranoid, enraged.
Like a train wreck.
Yeah. Saul tries to kill David multiple times, even turns against his own son, Jonathan, who stays loyal to David.
Oh, that adds a whole other layer to this, right?
Yeah.
Saul, David, and Jonathan.
It really does. The destructive power of jealousy, but also the strength of true friendship. And of course, the tragic consequences of Saul's choices, all playing out at the same time.
It's intense.
It is. And even though David is being hunted, he shows incredible restraint. He has chances to kill Saul, but refuses to harm the Lord's anointed. It really shows David's character, his respect for God's authority, even when his life is on the line.
So it's this back and forth, this cat and mouse chase.
Yeah.
David on the run, helped by Jonathan, and even Saul's daughter, Michal, who becomes David's wife. Talk about family drama.
The roles of women like Michal and later Abigail, they're really interesting. They show incredible courage, defy societal norms to protect David. They're not just passive figures, they're shaping their own destinies.
And influencing how things unfold.
Makes you wonder how often women in those times held positions of influence, even if it wasn't always acknowledged, right?
Yeah. And Saul, he's spiraling. He makes a drastic decision. He consults a medium.
Something that was totally forbidden by God.
Forbidden. This shows how far he's fallen.
It does. He's turned away from God. And now he's relying on, forbidden practices to see into his future.
And the prophecy.
It's not good. Predicts his death and the deaths of his sons in a battle against the Philistines.
So even though it comes from, this forbidden source, it lines up with God's judgment.
It sets the stage for this tragic end to this part of the story.
He's facing defeat, wounded in battle.
And he chooses to, fall on his own sword, rather than be captured by the Philistines.
The tragic end.
It is. And it's a direct result of his choices. It's heartbreaking, A man who started with so much potential, but let pride and disobedience just poison his leadership.
It's a powerful reminder that even those who seem to have it all can lose it because of their own actions.
Absolutely. So wrapping up this first part of our deep dive into 1 Samuel, what stands out to you about Saul?
I'm just struck by how his humility, it just gets eroded by power and jealousy. It's like a warning,
That's a great point. And I'm fascinated by this interplay between human choice and divine intervention. Saul, he keeps making choices that take him further from God, but God's still working through those choices to accomplish his purpose.
That's amazing, really.
It is. Even when we mess up, God's story is still unfolding.
Yeah, and that's encouraging.
It is. Now get ready for part 2, where we'll dive into David's rise and all the twists and turns of his journey as king.
It's a wild ride.
Well,
welcome back to our deep dive to 1 Samuel. We just saw the tragic end of King Saul. Power and pride, they really led him astray. But now the focus shifts to David, shepherd turned king, chosen by God to lead Israel. So David's story, it's not like a smooth transition of power or anything.
oh no.
It's like a roller coaster.
Yeah, it is.
Obscurity to fame, exile to the throne, loyalty, ambition, and the serious challenges of leadership.
One of the really fascinating things is how David's character, how it develops throughout this whole story. He's not some perfect hero.
Right.
He's flawed, he's capable of immense compassion, but also ruthlessness. He makes wise decisions, and some that make you go, huh.
He's human.
Yeah.
Relatable, right. That's what makes this so interesting.
Absolutely. So after Saul's death, David has a choice, right? He could try to grab the throne immediately.
It's over.
But he doesn't. He waits for God's timing.
Patience.
Shows a lot of patience, respect for the process, very different from Saul's impulsiveness.
Yeah.
He starts by becoming king of Judah, one of the tribes of Israel.
Okay.
While Saul's son, Ishbosheth, he's made king of the other tribes.
So you've got this division.
Yeah, and it sets off this power struggle, drags on for years.
Years.
Marked by, well, political maneuvering, betrayals, assassinations even. It reminds you that even when the transition of power, when it comes from God, things don't always go smoothly.
No, never easy. And through all of this, David's reputation, it just keeps growing.
Oh, yeah.
He's this skilled warrior, a leader who inspires people. He even gets some of Saul's old soldiers to join him.
That's a smart move on David's part. Shows he's not just a warrior, he's a politician. Knows how to build alliances, navigate that complex world of, tribal loyalties.
So eventually, Ishbosheth, he's killed by his own men.
Yeah.
And the elders of Israel, they come to David.
They ask him to be their king.
Big moment.
Huge turning point for Israel. They're finally united under David's leadership, fulfilling the prophecy that Samuel gave years before.
Okay, so first things first. David captures Jerusalem.
From the Jebusites.
Makes it the capital.
It's a symbolic move, It solidifies his authority, creates a central location for worship, for government. He's building a strong, unified nation.
Meaning something.
Yeah.
And then he brings the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem.
Which was, hugely significant religiously.
Yeah, why? What's the big deal?
This shows that David, he understands the power of symbols. He wants to connect his reign with God's covenant with Israel. It's like he's saying, we're not just a powerful nation, we're God's chosen people.
I like that.
But it's not all smooth sailing for David.
Oh, no. Here come the challenges.
He's constantly facing challenges. Conflicts with the Philistines.
Of course.
And then rebellions, even led by his own son.
Wait, what? His own son?
Absalom.
Oh, wow. Talk about family drama.
It is. It's like Shakespearean. These challenges really test David's leadership, show his strength, his resilience, but also his vulnerability.
Yeah, that rebellion, Absalom's rebellion, it's brutal.
Oh, yeah.
It's this family drama on a huge scale.
It shows how ambition, the thirst for power, it can shatter even the strongest family bonds.
So David, he has to flee Jerusalem. The text actually says that he's weeping as he goes, betrayed by his own son, facing a threat to everything he's worked for. It's a rough time for him.
This shows a different side of David, He's not just this king on a throne. He's a grieving father experiencing this very personal betrayal.
Wow. So eventually David's forces, they defeat Absalom's army.
Yeah.
But Absalom is killed.
Yeah, and David's reaction to his son's death, it's just heartbreaking. He cries out, oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom. Would God I had died for you, oh, Absalom, my son, my son.
He's grieving for the son who tried to overthrow him. That's intense.
Yeah. It is. It's so complex. On one hand, Absalom was a traitor, right? He wanted to steal David's throne. But on the other hand, he was still David's son. And that love, that parental bond, it was strong.
Hard to understand.
It is. It shows this incredible compassion, forgiveness even. And it raises some questions about leadership, about the cost of power, about family.
So David continues to wane. It's a mix of good and bad, right? He expands Israel's borders, establishes a strong central government, brings about this period of economic prosperity.
But he also makes mistakes, big ones. His affair with Bathsheba.
Oh, yeah, and the cover-up leading to the death of her husband.
Uriah the Hittite. This whole episode, it reveals a darker side of David. Shows that even the most celebrated figures, they're capable of doing wrong.
So it's like power corrupts.
Right.
Even people with good intentions can fall.
And it's important to note, the Bible doesn't try to hide David's sins. He's held accountable. He faces judgment, the consequences of his actions.
Nathan, the prophet, he confronts David directly, delivers this rebuke. prophesies that violence and tragedy are going to follow David's family.
And that prophecy, it foreshadows the turmoil that plagues David's family for generations. It's like a reminder our actions, they have ripple effects, impacting not just us, but those around us too.
But even when he fails, David shows real remorse.
It does.
He owns his sin. He asks for God's forgiveness, accepts the consequences.
This is what makes David different from Saul. Saul never admitted he was wrong. David owns his mistakes.
Yeah. It shows that even when we fall short, there's redemption. Through humility.
Absolutely. And that message is as relevant today as it was, well, thousands of years ago.
So we're wrapping up this part of our deep dive. I'm just struck by how complex David is as a person.
He is a blend of strength and flaws, a brilliant military leader, but a flawed human being who makes mistakes.
His story, it gives us a different way to look at leadership.
It does.
It reminds us that power comes with responsibility, with temptation, and consequences. It challenges us to think about how we handle ambition, loyalty, and that struggle to live up to our ideals.
Yeah. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll look at David's legacy and what his story means for us today.
Back again for our deep dive into the world of 1 Samuel. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? The story of Samuel, Saul, and David, it's packed with drama, political intrigue, and just like timeless lessons about leadership, about faith, about, well, what it means to be human.
It really is. And in this final part, we're going to be focusing on David's legacy.
Legacy, okay.
The lasting impact of his reign. I mean, he's often called Israel's greatest king, a man after God's own heart. But we know he wasn't perfect, right?
We've seen his flaws, his mistakes.
So what makes him so special? Why does he get that title?
Yeah, what sets him apart?
It's a good question. I don't think David's greatness was just about his military victories or his political skills.
So it wasn't just about conquering a land and building a powerful kingdom.
No, it went deeper. What made David different was his humility before God. He had this unshakable faith, even when everything was falling apart. And when he messed up, he really repented.
He owned his mistakes.
He did.
Not like Saul, who just, wouldn't admit he was wrong. You don't see that very often, especially from people in power.
It's true, and it's a powerful example. Being willing to acknowledge your wrongdoing, accepting the consequences, it says a lot about a person.
And, David's reign, it really was this golden age for Israel.
It was.
He united the tribes, fought off their enemies, made Jerusalem this vibrant center.
A spiritual and political center.
Right.
He gave them a sense of national identity and laid the foundation for, well, a dynasty that would last for centuries.
But his legacy, it goes beyond just, military stuff and politics.
Think about it. David is also revered as a poet, a musician.
The Psalms.
Psalms.
They're so raw, so honest. You could feel the faith, the doubt, the joy, the despair. They still speak to people today.
Thousands of years later. It's that emotional honesty. It's what makes the Psalms so powerful. They give a voice to, the full range of human experience.
Yeah. It's okay to come to God with all of it.
Right. All your emotions, even the messy ones. Your doubts, your fears, your anger, your heartbreak.
And, he wasn't afraid to just pour his heart out to God.
No, he wasn't. And through the Psalms, David explores these universal themes: forgiveness, redemption, God's love.
They've comforted and inspired people for, forever, across cultures, throughout history.
Exactly. And one thing that's always fascinated me, is the whole idea of the Messiah.
A Messiah.
This promised king who would come from David's line. What's the significance of that?
Yeah, what does that mean?
It's huge. The prophecy that a descendant of David would rule forever, it became the cornerstone of Jewish hope. It fueled this longing for a future king who would bring peace, justice.
And of course, for Christians, that hope is fulfilled in Jesus.
Who's recognized as a descendant of David, the King of Kings.
Wow. So David's story in 1 Samuel, it's just the beginning of something much bigger.
It is. And it shapes our understanding of faith, of leadership, of the human condition.
It makes you think about good and evil.
Yeah.
Right? The choices we make.
On the possibility of redemption, even when we really mess up.
Yeah, even when we mess up royally.
Exactly. It reminds us that even people who make mistakes, they can leave a positive impact on the world through their humility, their faith, their contributions.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into 1 Samuel, I'm wondering, what about David's character really stands out to you? What challenges you?
For me, it's that he never stops seeking God, even when he stumbles. He shows us that faith is a journey.
Yeah, I'm struck by how open he is with his emotions before God and others. It's powerful, you know. Strength isn't about hiding your weaknesses. It's about acknowledging them and asking for help.
That's good. The book of 1 Samuel, it's full of wisdom and insights.
It really is.
Take some time, explore it, see what speaks to you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those big questions. The ones that lead to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.